Beginning in Massachusetts, there was a young slave woman named Maria. She was executed for the arson and murder in September 1681. Officials executed 58 slave women before 1790 and 126 slave women from 1790 to emancipation. Undoubtedly, authorities executed far more slave women than what the historical record reveals. Jurisdiction put to death roughly half of all executed slave women for murder, conspiracy to murder, and attempted murder in the colonial period. But this figure increases 73% in the antebellum period. So that's after the 13 colonies. The attempts of them murdering their slave masters increased 73%. Slave women mostly strangled, clubbed, stabbed, burned, shot, poisoned, or hacked to death their white masters, mistress, overseers, and even the owner's children. Oh, they definitely was getting their get back. Whites were nearly 92% of the victims of slave condemned to hang in the colonial Virginia, and officials convicted 241 slaves for the violent killing of whites in the antebellum Virginia. And officials of these homicides, slaves murdered 119 of their masters or members of the master's family, and 122 other whites, including persons of authorities, overseers, hirees, constables. Regrettably, the historical record does not distinguish between female and male slaves involved in these killings. I found it. I found what they was trying to hide. So I'm gonna do most of the talking because I couldn't find any videos that was really showing and like all of the pictures and stuff like that. So I'm gonna just read it for y'all because this is crazy. In March 2008, this man named David V. Baker made a 25-page article talking about all of the things that women in slavery did to get their reparations, to get their get back. Let's get into it. Black females retaliated violently against white oppressive brutality. I'm gonna let y'all know, I got a strong feeling that I, in a past life, was in those times of slavery. So that's why I feel so strongly about telling the other side of our story. I've been here before. Slavers sadistically abused slave children just to watch the mother's anguish, and if a child dies from the cruelty, slavers forced the mother to throw their child overboard or suffer from even more brutality. Slavers were no less barbaric in their treatment capturing pregnant slave women. Abroad, the American slave ship Hongas, carrying some 250 mostly pregnant women. For instance, females who survived the initial stage of pregnancy gave birth aboard the ship with their bodies exposed to either the scorching sun or freezing cold. Look, I'm gonna say this. Viewer discretion is advised because we get in 100% in detail. This video is not real for entertainment purposes, for educational purposes. This video is scripted, all of that. Listen, okay? You see me? All right, family, understand me. Even if a newborn survived the ordeal, captured mothers often smothered to death their babies, fearing the child would grow up in slavery. This historical record is clear. In the earlier periods of the initial contact with Africans, American slave traders viciously mistreated the female captives. African women suffered excessively from brutalization and terrorism of the slave trade, with slavers commonly subjected black women to such unique forms of abuse as ape, sexual assault, and vicious attacks against their pregnancies and motherhood. There is so little in the record on slave women in the early colonial history that one legal historian refers to the period as the Dark Ages of American law. Still, slavery was horrible for the men, but it was far dreadful for the women. Jurisdictions executed more than 3 times as many slave women in antebellum slavery as in colonial slavery. So that's after the 13 colonies. In Maryland, 1707, Jenny, a slave woman, hanged in chains for poisoning to death her master. In the newspaper, it said it was a horrible punishment that amounted to slow starvation beyond the state's law. Virginia authorities burned alive Eve for poisoning her master, Peter Montague, with a glass of milk. Executioners afterward quartered Eve to burn her body and displayed it publicly. There is nothing in the historical record as to why Jenny and Eve killed their masters. But to Schwartz, Eve died because of common law, her status as a slave and her identity as a woman. That's why they did it, because she's a woman and she don't really have no rights. In July of 1818, Sarah and 5 or more others beat slave owner Dr. Robert Berkeley to death, burned his body in a cabin fireplace, and then buried the remains. Shortly before Berkeley's murder, one of the killers confessed to a friend his master was a bad master and he would soon die then serve him. The same year, Caddy murdered her previous owner, Lena Harwell, who once referred to Caddy as a prostitute. 2 years after that, and I'm pretty sure y'all heard this story in the last video, Celia, along with Abel, axed to death James Pownell and his wife, and then set their house on fire with them in it, but saved the couple's infant child. Celia and Abel's owner, a man named Daughtry, hired out Abel and James Pownell, who repeatedly whipped Abel. Officials hanged the two for murder in August 1821. In another case, Missouri hanged a 13-year-old slave girl named Mary when she confessed to beating and drowning one of her owner's children in 1838. Virginia executed Jane Williams in 1852 for slashing to death with a hatchet her master's wife and infant. Reportedly, Jane's owner mistreated her badly and had threatened to sell Jane without selling along her child. A newspaper at the time characterized Jane as a fiend and a wretched murderess, and that she would die without the smallest particle of sympathy for any human being possessed of the ordinary feelings of justice. In another case, y'all, they tried to hide this. They tried to hide all of the stories. They were literally scared. 92% of the crimes that was happening was against white people. Another case in 1839, Lincoln Circuit Court, Missouri, found slave Fanny guilty of murdering William Florence, a 10-year-old white boy found dead in a peach orchard. The evidence showed that Fanny had killed the boy, although authorities garnered the testimony of slave witnesses under the threat of death. Wait, so they basically were saying, if you don't say she did this, I'm gonna kill you. There is nothing in record to show that Fanny was hanged for the murder. She most likely was. Fanny, a slave versus the state, 1839. Also, in March 1844, Judge Henry Goldthwaite, determined that Alabama authorities should hang Nancy, a slave woman, for assaulting with intent to kill Mary Beasley, a white woman. Slave women were often vicious in killing their white oppressors. In September 1731, Hannah, a slave woman belonging to Moses Atwater in Connecticut, hanged for murdering two teenage white girls, Jemima Beecher and Hannah Merriman, who resided in Atwater's house. The slave woman reportedly crept into the girls' bedroom and stabbed the two in their throat with a large butcher knife, killing them instantly. In the gruesome case, officials in New Jersey hanged 15-year-old Jane Huff, a slave girl belonging to 62-year-old Sarah Height, in May 1837. Sarah nagged and scolded Jane about almost everything, and at times struck Jane with household objects. Jane was often indifferent to Sarah's concerns and disobeying her orders, prohibiting Jane to see her young boyfriend. One night, after Sarah fallen asleep in a chair, Jane hit Sarah between the eyes with a fire poker, severely stunning her. Jane then dragged Sarah over to the fireplace where meat was boiling in the kettle, removed the meat, and then thrusted Sarah's head into the boiling water. Jane did not release the grip until Sarah Height's head was cooked like a lobster. She barbecued her ass. Bruh, this is crazy. This is crazy. This is what I literally felt this last night, y'all. At times, murdering slave women had white servant accomplices. A New Jersey sheriff dragged a slave woman named Hager and a slave man named Ben on a wooden sledge through town to their execution after a court convicted them of murdering their master. Their accomplice was a white servant named John Hunt. The three had conspired to kill Sharon. While in April 1707, while inspecting his fields and distracted by Hager's purposeful small talk, Hunt hacked Sharon to death with a hatchet after Ben had retrieved the murder weapon from a tool shed. Y'all, there were white servants who were also helping them commit these actions. Oh yeah, we had some kinfolk that wasn't skinfolk still helping us too. At their execution site, Hager was chained to a stake and burnt to ashes, probably while still alive and conscious. Ben was hanged by his neck until dead. After that, his body was dipped in tar and set in a wrought-full iron frame, a gibbet. This was hung aloof from the derrick pole for all to see. It probably remained there for many years. Hunt died the same way the county officers had put Ben to death a month earlier. We gotta go to the next page, y'all. This is a lot of information. They hung the white man too. In another case, authorities in Michigan hanged a slave woman named Anne Wiley for attempting to arson her master's home, and a Canadian Frenchman named John Countessino, what the fuck type last name is that, for robbery in March 1777. An alternative explanation is that the judge Philip D. sentenced the two to wear hemp collars that slowly choked them to death. Still, another version of the execution is that John hanged and Anne bought her freedom from execution by serving as John's executioner. So Anne might have got away. Y'all, it says 48% involved multiple executions that occurred on the same day for the same crime. Literally the same thing. Often they master or them poisoning or doing stuff like that would happen on the same day on different plantations. We also got story melanated slave women who were also working with their man or their, slave men to kill their masters too. Of the 165 slave women execution during colonial and antebellum slavery, slave women Confederates were usually one or two slave men. For instance, Virginia hanged Winnie and her accomplice Phil for murdering their master most barbarously near Fredericksburg in July 1769. In several multiple executions, slave women acted with one or two other slave women in committing the murder or poisoning in retaliation for their mistreatment for white owners. In Virginia, officials hanged Priest and Sally, I think that's her name, Priest and Sally, for killing their mistress who had been repeatedly violent towards Priest. Melvane, a female slave belonging and Melvane's slave brother Mango, hanged in February 1855 in a parish jail yard in Louisiana for killing young Wesley Latham, the son of the overseers of the plantation, 1855. Prevass was engaged to Latham, and Melvin feared that Latham would usurp her authorities in the household. Jurisdictions often imposed harsher punishment on slave women than their male conspirators. Slave women often burned to death for their crime, whereas male conspirators hanged for the same offense. In September 1681, Massachusetts burned alive Maria for the arson of her master, the master's house that intentionally killed the Lambay's baby girl. Some argue that her sentence was severe because of the infant's death. The rationale for burning alive Maria, then authorities would not have simply banished her two black males from the colony, but imputed the painful execution method of burning at the stake. In February, New York, 1708, an unidentified slave woman roasted alive over a slow fire for several hours with a vessel of cool water held near her mouth. When she finally expired, her body was burnt to ashes. Her two unidentified male slave accomplices hanged for the same murder. Y'all see that? They killed the women even more worser than they killed the men. They was executed for arson, assault, attempted arson, treason, poisoning, arson again. Y'all, there is 25 pages of this. If y'all want me to continue to read this, let me know. Comment for part 2. Well, we already on part 2. Comment for part 3 of this, me reading this article, because we ain't even got through yet. Shout out to David V. Baker for actually putting this in an article, doing the research, having citations also at the end of the article. He referenced everything that he got his information from. David V. Baker, salute to you. Let's give David V. Baker a clap. Let's give him a clap. Y'all stay dangerous. Let me know if y'all want a part 3.